Hi everyone. This week we are going to be talking about one of my absolute favorite topics, my favorite element of design, color. And we're going to be talking about color theory, and there's so much to talk about with color that there's no way that I could possibly go over it in just a couple of videos. So for your assignments this week, you have some options about some independent articles, videos that you can watch on YouTube, TED Talks that you can watch, and games that you can interact with about color. So you'll have some choices around that, and then you'll be making your own personal color associations and a PowerPoint presentation. But to start with, let's start talking about what the basics of color are. So really simply, color is the visible light spectrum. And the colors that we can see and perceive with our eyes and our brains have to do with this really teeny tiny small bandwidth of light. Light moves in waves, and the height of those waves determines what kind of light you are seeing. So on one side you have things like gamma rays and X-rays, and on the other side you have things like radio waves. Well, the band of light that our eyes and human brains can perceive is really teeny tiny. If you look really closely at this chart, you'll see that it's only about from 400 nanometers to 700 nanometers. It's a really small range of light that we can see. And on one side you have ultraviolet light, and then on the other side you have infrared light, which is why it's really important when you're talking about color theory that you don't use the word purple. Most of the time we can use the word purple and violet interchangeably, and we usually use that interchangeably when we're talking. But when you're talking about color and light and color theory, it's always violet because there's no such thing as ultra purple light. It's ultraviolet light. Some animals and creatures can see outside of what our eyes and brains can perceive. So for example, some insects can perceive ultraviolet light and they can see different colors than we can. And then some animals, like dogs, they can't perceive as much light as we can, so they see even fewer colors than we do. When you think about color, we usually tend to think about this spectrum right here that we just talked about with light. And essentially, all that color is, the colors that our eyes and brains can perceive, is refracted light, or what we can see in a rainbow. So Sir Isaac Newton, when he wasn't busy discovering and figuring out calculus, also studied optics and figured out what the primary colors of light are. And you may be surprised to learn, and if you do some of this extra investigating with some of the videos that I have, you'll find out a little bit more about this, but the primary colors of light are different than the primary colors that we use in art class to mix stuff up. So Sir Isaac Newton did a bunch of experiments, and he found out that the primary colors of light are red, green, and blue. In art class, when we talk about color, we use the color wheel. So basically it's just a rainbow turned in on itself. And this wheel allows us to understand and conceive of relationships both between and among the colors in the visible light spectrum. This is a basic color wheel. It has 12 colors in it. It has the 3 primary colors of subtractive, the 3 secondary colors, and the 6 tertiary colors. I'll talk about those in just a second. When Sir Isaac Newton was doing his experiments, he learned about the primary colors of light, which are different than when we mix paints together because of how that light reflects and refracts off of objects. So when you are adding light together, all those different wavelengths of light, you're getting closer and closer to white. So those are called additive primary colors. And in art, when you're mixing paints together, the fewer colors you have, the closer you're getting to white. So that's why they're called subtractive. It wasn't until I was in college learning about art that I figured out for the first time ever that there were different types of primary colors. And I felt like I had been lied to my whole life. I was very disappointed in it. There are also different primaries when it comes to inks. So if you have ever changed the cartridges in an inkjet printer, you may notice that those are even a little bit more different than the usual red, yellow, and blue that we're used to when we talk about primary colors, usually in art class. The colors that you'll see in a printer are cyan, magenta, and yellow, which are just slightly different versions of those red, blue, and of course, yellow. So you may see when you're doing stuff online, if you're coding stuff online, it depends if you want it to be put on a computer screen. If it's put on a computer screen because there's light projected from that, you would use the Sir Isaac Newton. So the red, green, blue primaries. If you were going to print something out, you may need to double check that your settings are in CMY, and then the K in this particular case stands for black. So cyan, magenta, yellow, and K stands for black. But what we're going to be talking about is what most of you guys are probably familiar with. Red, yellow, and blue with our subtractive colors, just for our basic color wheel as we get started. So these primary colors, the red, yellow, and blue, can't be mixed together to create other colors. So you can find other ways to make like a green or an orange, for example, but the primaries are the basics. They're the basic building blocks for all of your other colors. Primary color schemes are typically seen with a couple of things. You see a lot of primary colors, especially put together in children's stuff. So if you were to walk into a preschool or a kindergarten classroom, if you were to walk into the little kid section of a toy store, you would see a lot of primary colors together. Primary colors are typically associated with very small children. They're also, because they're kind of these intense wavelengths of light, also associated with things that are high energy. So, kids are kind of high energy, but also certain companies and brands use primary colors, like Red Bull, in their logos and their design. They're letting you know this product has a lot of energy, just like these colors. It also can depict something that's like basic and fundamental. So Wonder Bread is a type of white bread that's been around for decades and decades. Basic fun. And then Burger King also uses primary colors in its logo. Secondary colors are what you get when you mix equal parts of the two primary colors next to it. So if you mix together red and yellow, you'll get orange. If you mix together yellow and blue, you'll get green. And because we're talking color theory, when you mix together blue and red, you'll get violet. Remember, you can generally use that interchangeably with purple, but when we're talking about color theory, we're going to be using violet. Secondary color schemes are a lot more rare. These secondary colors put together don't look great together. They tend to be, because they have technically all of the colors mixed in together, they can be a little bit busy. But if you're ever watching something and you see a character that has secondary colors in their costume, their wardrobe, whatever, it's a cue to you that they're probably a bad guy. So you have characters like Maleficent, who has green skin and purple robes. The Joker, who is wearing a purple suit. He's got green accents on it. The Green Goblin, he has his purple outfit, green skin, and he's even using that third secondary color with his pumpkin smoke bombs. A lot of students like to push back with me, but Hulk is an Avenger. Yes, of course, you are right. But the green skin is signifying to you that he has been poisoned somehow. So gamma radiation has made him different. You'll see a lot of this like bright lime green color to signify if someone is evil or somehow poisoned or toxic. Now, the animators for Marvel could have picked his pants to be absolutely any color, but they paired that bright gamma toxic green with violet purple pants to create that kind of interesting, doesn't look great together color scheme of two secondary colors together. It's really rare to see secondary colors placed together in brands and logos, but there are a couple of examples here. The Phoenix Suns use a combination of secondary colors, violet and orange, and then some yellow-orange, to signify, and it kind of reflects, where they are at. So in Phoenix, it's really hot. It's in Arizona, it gets like to 120 degrees sometimes in the summer. And Phoenix, the city that it's named after, and the mythical bird, rises from their own ashes, and this reflects fire and sunsets and heat. So that's why they've chosen this. This logo right here is for the University of Miami, which of course is in Florida, and the colors in their logo reflect where they're from. So, of course, Florida is famous for its citrus and its oranges, Florida orange juice, everyone's favorite, and the Everglades, which are close by. So, kind of like Phoenix, the University of the University of Miami's logo reflects where their location is. Not typically great to put together. Like if you're getting dressed in the morning, I wouldn't recommend combining these particular colors. And then FedEx has a couple of different logos. The bluish violet and orange together signify ground transportation. So there's a couple of different color combinations for FedEx, but this is one where you will see secondary colors put together. For the most part, if you see two secondary colors together, it's letting you know, like, bad guy. Now the tertiary colors, these are the colors you get when you mix a primary color and the secondary color next to it. What's really important for this is you know that the primary color always has to come first. It always needs to be listed first. So it's not an orange-red, it's a red-orange. It's helping you figure out where on the color wheel that color needs to go. So there are 6 of them, and these are the different combinations of primary and secondary. There's red-orange, yellow-orange, yellow-green, blue-green, blue-violet, and red-violet. And while, of course, you can find some of these tertiary colors in brands and logos and designs and stuff like that, it's a lot more rare because these are more complicated colors. And for the most part, brands and companies like to have the bold and easily recognizable color schemes that we talked about with primary and secondary colors. There's a part 2 to this. I have more color theory to tell you about in just a little bit. But this is part 1, our basics of what color is, primary colors, secondary colors, and tertiary colors. I'll see you for part 2 in just a little bit.